Now, the first thing that I'd like to talk about here, I'll give just a little introduction, is that when this event was first contemplated and first scheduled to be here in this room on this day, that was some significant months ago when that first idea came. And then what Keith was thinking, that's Keith Warner, he and Donna are those two that plan and then produce all of these events. So they're the planners. They find venues, they fund the process, they sell the tickets, they do everything. All I have to do is show up and talk. So they do all the work, I have all the fun, and it's a really good deal for me. So anyhow, Keith had this idea, all right, it's going to be 3 or 4 months from now, let's go back to California, back to the LA area where you first talked about the experiments in 2016 and give them some results. Surely there'll be some results by then. So that's how this event got started, was Keith believing that surely there would be some results then. I cautioned Keith. I said, well, Keith, maybe you don't want to schedule that yet because we really don't have any results yet. And these things are not that simple to set up. There's a pretty steep learning curve in putting together this equipment and making it work right. The concepts are simple. The diagram is easy. It only has 4 or 5 pieces. To look at it, you'd think, oh, piece of cake. But to actually set it up in hardware and make it work is difficult because we're talking about a quantum experiment. We're talking about measuring things like photons and measuring photons so you know exactly what pair of photons to correlate between detectors and screen, which means you have to measure times down in the nanosecond range. You see, so it's a little daunting when you think about actually what we're doing, working with things that are moving the speed of light, measuring the time they take to go this far at the speed of light, and being precise enough that we can tell which particles correlate with each other. So all of that is a difficult thing to do. And it's being done right here in this LA area in Pomona at Cal Polytech. And the person who is in charge of that process is standing right over here. That's Farbod. And Farbod is in the engineering school. Okay. So that deserves a little explanation all by itself. When we first did the crowdfunding that enabled us to actually go forward and try to do these experiments, we had a long list of potential places and people to get the experiments done. And as we went through our list, we got no, 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 don't ever call me again, no. We didn't find many takers on it. We found several that said, oh yeah, sounds like a good idea, and then the terrible C word came up, that this experiment had something to do with consciousness. And the reason that's a problem for physicists is that consciousness is subjective. Physics, from their viewpoint, is an objective science. The two don't really have anything to do with each other. And if you are a physicist working in objective science and you do experiments that have something to do with the subjective, that's not good for your career. You see, so it's not what they do. So they don't see that as being in their ballpark, something they worry about. Now these are just straight quantum physics experiments. There's nothing, there's no consciousness meter that you have to plug into it. There's no physical kind of consciousness connection. So it's just a straightforward quantum mechanics experiment. But the consciousness is connection. I mean, they've all heard of the consciousness connection, but it's very controversial. And people tend to shy away from stuff that's controversial. So we had trouble with that. But recall that one of the premier sites for doing research in the subjective world, in the intuitive world, was Pear Labs, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research. Pear Labs is not functioning now, but it went for about 20, 25 years, did lots and lots of exceedingly good work where people were using their intentions to modify all sorts of things. But in the beginning, it was probability distributions. They'd set a little robot on a circular table, set it in the middle of the table, and they'd turn this robot on, and the robot was programmed to move in random directions. So it would have as equal opportunity and probability to move right as left and forward as far as back. So it would just sit there and dither around in the center of the table as it was making all these movements, but randomly, so it never left the center of the table until someone came in with their intention to bias those random movements, and that little robot would fall right off the edge of the table, you see, which was, of course, impossible. And that was done with a person's intent. So they did a lot of experiments like that. And their protocols were excellent. And they were, the people running that, running the experiments, tended to be physicists. But it wasn't Princeton Physics Department. It was the Engineering Anomalies Research. So why did this physics study end up in the engineering department? Well, there's a good reason for that. Physicists have a lot of investment in their theory, and their theory is very solidly materialistic. Okay. Engineers have very little investment in theory. Engineers just want to know, does it work? That's it. Is there something meaningful behind the research? Great. Does it work or it doesn't work? That's an engineer's viewpoint. Theory, who cares? If it works, that tells us something. If it doesn't, that tells us something. And there's no real connection there to, oh, but this is against our rules, you know. It shouldn't work, and we really don't want it to work because that would confuse us all. So engineers don't have that problem. That's why Pear Labs was in the engineering department. And that's why Farbod represents the engineering department, because we went through probably, I don't know, a couple of dozen physics departments with 0 results and 0 takers. And first time I talked with Farbod, he said, great, sounds good. I'm doing quantum work already in quantum encryption. I'd be glad to do it. Sounds like fun. Hey, do you know anything about consciousness? Because I'm real interested in conscious computers. And I said, oh, we're going to get along together real well. Yes. So the C word didn't frighten Farbod at all. He embraced the C word, and now he's been working on it. It took us a long time to get the contracts in place. And those things sometimes just take time, because if it was just Farbod and I that had to do a contract, we could have done it in an hour. But it has to run through countless administrators as well. And I have to run mine through a lawyer, and it just takes time to do all that. And then you send it back, and then you send it back again because this wasn't right, and you do it back. And after 6 or 7 of those iterations, you're 6 months into the process of getting the contract done. So that takes a lot of time. And then I've been traveling so much that I was slow on my end sometimes at turning things around because I haven't been home to do that. But anyway, we got that contract in place. It's a year-long contract. And it's just a couple of months since really it's been in force, since it's all the legal work's done. And of course, the person doing the work is told by his management, don't do any of the work until the contract's in place, right? That's what the legal team and that's what the administrators tell you. So Farbod was actually doing the work, but just quietly where nobody could see him. even though the contract wasn't really in place yet, because he was interested and he wanted to do it. So, he was kind of working on it on the side over the summer, but you can't get so much done that way. So really the contract started in about the same time school started, which is not really a good time, Professors are busy when school starts. They got a whole lot of things happening all at once. So for the last, since school started sometime probably in August or early September or middle August or something, right? Something like.
It was actually approved last week.
Yeah.
It was approved last week.
Last week?
The formal approval.
Formal approval for him from his management was last week. So he's been working on this for several months, and now he can admit it. Yeah. So we haven't been working on it very long, and it's a very challenging problem to set this up and get it to work right. To get one photon at a time. Just imagine how difficult that is, to get your equipment to look at one photon at a time. It's a tiny little thing. Actually, it isn't a thing. It's just a probability. And it changes location very, very fast. So it's a challenging setup. So here we are, 1 week into the contract, and Farbod's going to give you a little report on some of the challenges he has, and about when he thinks, or how long he thinks it might take to get results, and what we can look forward to. And I know all of you have been looking forward to this. I must get 10 emails every day that says, Tom, what's going on with those experiments? We haven't heard anything for a couple of months. And I'm thinking, the last time I gave you a report, I said I'd let you know when I had some results. But another week goes by and haven't heard from you this week. Well, how are those experiments doing? So it's going to take a little longer than that. We're going to be months away from the possibility of a result. We're just getting the equipment. Farbod has just looked up a piece of equipment that we're not sure we have to buy, but it's a possibility. And it only costs $10,000. And to buy things that cost that much in a university takes a lot of time, because Farbod is being very kind to us, and he is trying to convince his university to buy that equipment, because it's equipment that they can use, other things. So he's making a case for getting that done. So he's really given us a wonderful price, and is trying real hard to give us some good results for a low ticket, which will leave us more money to build a good story and video of this whole project, so we can make a real good documentary of the process, which will then spread the whole idea much farther and much wider. You see, so it's great to do the work, but getting the work out to where lots of people know about it is another daunting process, and that also takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money. So Farbod, tell us where you are and where you're going.
Hello everybody, my name is Farbod Khousnoud. I'm a faculty at Cal Poly Pomona in the engineering college, and it's my great pleasure and honor to work for Tom on this project really and learning from him. So I'd like to give you a little bit background about what I do and the relation to quantum, and then explain the actual test. So also I'd like to thank Professor Khousnoud, who is sitting there, so who introduced initially to me to Tom, so gave me this opportunity to be able to work on this interesting project. And so I've been working with Professor Ohadi maybe for more than 10 years on different projects, research projects. Basically, the actual project was for only 2 years, 2009 to 2011, which we worked on a kind of a nano-electromechanical engine, which we published the work. But since then, we have been friends, so mostly. And then he published that interesting paper with Tom maybe a few years ago.
Stand up,
and
see who you are.
I've had the opportunity to work with both of them before. And my background related to quantum, because I'm an engineer. So basically what we have been doing before I met Tom was how we can apply quantum to engineering systems, basically. As you know, there's a lot of work on quantum computers, quantum computing. People are trying to do a lot of work on that. But nobody really has applied quantum capabilities to engineering systems, let's say robots. So we want to know how we can integrate quantum capabilities, let's say quantum entanglement, quantum cryptography, to robotic systems. So that's what I've been doing in terms of my background. So yes, we're trying to basically say, as you may have heard about in quantum, they call Alice and Bob, so they're entangled. We say, how can we apply that the same quantum technology, which is Alice and Bob, to robotic systems? So we can call them Alice drone maybe, Alice robot maybe, or Bob robot. So basically these are the things that we want to apply in the engineering domain. And so for example, in this case, we have a Bob robot and we have Alice robot, so they're communicating, and the communication is by laser, which is creating photons and then receiving their photons on the other side on the other robot. And then basically there's kind of a quantum cryptography communication, which we can use it to control the robots. So it's another just figures. In terms of entanglement, we are just using the same technology that physicists have been developed on quantum entanglement. And we say, okay, now if we have that quantum entanglement and put them on the sensors, basically, just put the sensors under, or what is actually in terms of sensor is a single photon counters. If you put the single photon counters, which you see in this figure on the top, on two robots, and we send two entangled pairs of photons, can we entangle these robots so they can do the same things without communicating with each other? Okay, so they're entangled robots. So these are just my background. So again, it's another figure of, and we have published this recent. There's a recent publication. There's available to public. There's another one. Some of the work actually I did with JPL. So we have some co-authors on this paper. So some of them are accepted, some of them in progress. So these are all the technologies that we are developing and the system that we have on the testing. We also work on the theory background, how we can really combine quantum mechanics to classical dynamics in terms of dynamical systems, not in terms of quantum computers or in terms of molecular systems, with actual mechanical systems like robots. So what does it mean? What the control system look like? Not only that, we also try to teach that now, bring it to teaching. So we want to teach a course that is combination of control system, mechanical system, and quantum. So I would like to teach that now. I'm developing a course to teach that. And so in terms of research of the application, so for example, the police department is interested in our quantum cryptography, quantum entanglement for robotics application in terms of security and emergency response. And as I mentioned, I've been working with different people from different universities. JPL, I have the publication I've been with, the latest publication was with JPL and Brunel University London and University of British Columbia in California. So this is just a little vision about that I think that the future. So we have to be prepared for this future. So basically we will have a lot of autonomous systems and robotic systems in future. So how do we really deal with this network of huge autonomous systems? And I think quantum is a good solution in my opinion. So now, with that background, this is the experimental setup that we have been trying to work and we have been trying to do in the lab since just the start of the summer. And I've been working with one of the students, Nathan is here, Nathan Suetlov, and Anand Handam is my colleague from Cal Poly Pomona. So they have been helping me to set up this experiment. So when you have the double slit, they are about a micrometer apart from each other. So the slits that we are talking about that we want to do the experiment. So now one of the questions is, as Tom may show you the experimental setup, maybe the configuration later. I'm not sure if you have planned to show it.
I can if you ask the question.
So
If anybody wants to know that, I can draw a little diagram if you're interested in that, but
yes. So
physics usually bores most people.
So now the question is how really we set up, if there you have two sleeves that are micrometer apart from each other, how do you place other equipment just right after that? So we have to come up with some solutions. So Tom has been helping us with solutions really. So how we actually can do that. So give us direction, give us guidance how to do this kind of experiment. And we have been trying to do that in the lab. So because we have the equipment, and Thomas has been supporting us, we have been learning also. There's a learning curve for us also. It's not something that we all already know about it. So everything is in progress. And we're hoping that we can get some results sometime. We don't know yet when we can get results, but we are working on it. We're working on it, and the work is in progress. And we continuously work. We never stop. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now you've heard what's going on, from the guy who's doing the work. So I'm not trying to trick you. Okay, like I say, we can talk about anything, and I guess we should start putting hands up to see what the questions are.
I wanted to know about the role of self-compassion in our growth. If I make some sort of mistake and I extend the same sort of compassion to myself that I do to others, where I focus down on the feeling bad part of it, and instead am focusing on the learning to do better in the future. Am I hampering my growth somehow by tamping down that part of the feedback? Okay,
the question is about, well, I'll phrase it very differently, but it will be the same question. It's about that old saw that you've heard, you can't love anybody else unless you love yourself, right? It's that same sort of thing, in that you need to have compassion for yourself. And people wonder about that, okay? If I'm going to have compassion about myself, is that just me? Is that just my ego wanting to make me feel better? Or is that really part of the solution, in that I have compassion for myself? You see, that's the twist, right, that people have. So the answer to that is that it is very important that you don't dislike yourself. Okay? Disliking yourself, having negative feelings about yourself, will prevent you from growing up. So, and when I say that, that doesn't mean that you intellectually don't like yourself. Oh, I'm just not a nice person. That disliking yourself often happens at a level that you're not even aware of. It's a level that's an intuitive level, down at the being level, what I call the being level, as opposed to the intellectual level, and it's just part of who you are. And that not liking yourself is always attached to a fear. And as most of you know, that's a bad thing. Fear is not a good thing. And that's why a person who has negative feelings about themselves, it's because they have a fear. They have fear of being inadequate. They have a fear of not being good enough. They have a fear of failing. They have all this fear. And because they have that fear, they believe that all those things are true. They believe that they're really not very good and that they need to be a whole lot better than they are. And they don't feel very confident about what they're doing and how they're doing it and whether it will succeed or not. All that comes from a fundamental fear. And yes, you have to get rid of that fear. It's important to find your fears, otherwise you can't get rid of them. It's important to own your fear, which means say, all right, I found it, but That's not an intellectual process. You have to find it down at the deep level where you say, all right, I feel that. That is me, and I own it. I'm like that. I have this fear. Because until you own it, you can't get rid of it. If you don't own it, and it's all just an intellectual exercise, then you will come up with all kinds of conclusions like, well, all right, I just won't have that fear anymore and go on with your life, but that doesn't work, right? That doesn't ever work. You have to own it at a deep level, and then you can get rid of it. And really the best way of getting rid of it is just to have a very strong intent that you don't want to be that way anymore. And as you feel yourself being that way, you stop yourself. Now that is part of intellect, but that helps you get there. But you see, once you accept it, that pulls the teeth. If you can say, okay, I'm inadequate and I probably won't do a real good job here, but I'll do my best. But you accept that, that's the way you are, then you can stop worrying about whether you're doing a good job or not, because you accept that it's going to be whatever it is, and that's what you do, and you'll do your best, and that's as much as you can do. And if you just accept that, then you're no longer nagging at yourself and telling yourself that you're inadequate, and oh no, this is going to be a disaster, because you've already accepted that possibility. Okay, maybe it'll be a disaster, but I have the courage to go do it anyway and just see how it comes out. You see, that's the right approach. It takes courage. If you don't have courage, then you say, oh no, it's going to be a disaster and I don't want to go. I don't want to be part of it. I'm just going to go hide out in my room until it's over. You know, and then you don't grow. But that's denying it, not accepting it. And when I say accept it, I don't mean, oh, it's okay. You know, I like being inadequate. You know, that's not what I mean by saying accept it. I mean, you say, that's me. I do feel that way. I do have this fear. I don't want to get up and talk in front of a lot of people. It scares me to death. But I have the courage to go do it anyway and just let it come out however it does. If it comes out that I make a fool of myself, well, that's just the way it is. People will just have to live with that, and I'll live with it too, and I accept all that. See, that's courage. And it's courage that it's hard for most people to scare up, that kind of courage. But the only thing that beats fear is courage. Because what you'll find almost always is that all of that stuff you fear is just smoke. It's nothing really there. All the tigers are just paper tigers. Nothing's really there. So when you have that courage and you find out, oh, that wasn't so bad. You know, but without the courage, you don't get to that, it wasn't so bad. So that's the way you deal with fear. And yes, you have to accept yourself. Now, let's say you accept yourself and you say, well, okay, I'm harsh with people, I'm arrogant, and I use people. You know, none of those are very nice, but let's say you just accept that. Say, well, that is the way I am. Well, you should then think about, well, how does that inform my choices? What do I do? How do I interact? And my choices to, interact with people, things I say, how does that affect that? And if you say, well, it really affects it negatively, then you come with the conclusion, I don't want to be that. Don't come to the conclusion, I don't want to do that, because that's different. What you do is acting. What you are is, I don't want to be that. Because we don't want to just fix your behavior. That's not that, well, it's helpful to everybody else that you interact with, but it's not so helpful for you for growing up if you just fix behavior. Behavior is not the issue. The issue is what's inside at a deep level. So yes, you do have to accept yourself. You don't have to like it. But eventually, if you want to change who you are, you will like it, because you'll keep changing. That intent to not be that way will actually make you not that way over time. Intent modifies future probability. That's all you need, is that strong intent. And after that, you'll do just the right things to make it work. because your intention will lead you to do the right things to make it work. So that's how you get out of that. But yes, being hard on yourself, saying, oh, boy, did I mess that up. That's so terrible. You know, I just am not a good person, and on and on with that. That is just self-destructive. That will not get you anywhere. So it's not ego to say, you know, I'm doing my best. This is all I know how to do right now. I may get up and stand up in front of the audience and not do anything but stare at everybody and not be able to get a word out. And after 2 or 3 minutes of looking at the audience like a deer caught in a headlight, I'm going to take my notes and walk off the stage and leave. Okay? When my daughter was probably 3 years old and in preschool, that's the way she acted when she had to stand up in front of a group of parents who were the audience and sing a song that they had learned in her class. And there were like 15 little girls up there all singing this song they had memorized, and the teacher standing in front of them, and my daughter just stood there with her eyes about this big, staring at all those people. And then the tongue came out and went over here and went over there, because that's what she does when she was really anxious. And she just stood there with that tongue rolling around in her mouth until the whole thing was over, and then she got out of there. You know, she didn't sing a word. Well, some of us as adults feel in that same situation, you know. But she got up there, and she stood there, and she was part of it. And the next year, of course, she did a whole lot better, because she grew up some in between. But you got to just accept it, you know. You are the way you are. Do what you have to do. Learn from it, and then go forward. It's a problem comes when you say, well, I can't do anything because I don't know really what's best. So then you get stuck. I don't know, should I do this or should I do that? So you don't do anything because you don't want to do it wrong. That traps you in indecision and in doing nothing. So then you go in your room and hide. You know, that's the solution, right? Go close the door and stay in your room and don't come out. Say, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't feel good. So you need to go do it anyway, accept whatever it is, and learn from it. So you give it your best shot. You look at, how did that work? You make adjustments, and you give it your next best shot. That's how you go through life and grow up. It's not about success or failure. It's about courage and about doing the best you can. If you just have courage and do the best you can, the success will come all by itself. Trying to reach for the success is problematical. It's hard to get there that way because it's hard to get through all the fear to get to that success. But if you just do the best you can and realize that that's good enough, it's all I can do, it's the best I can. Do it, have the courage to do that, learn from it. And most of the fear will just disappear all by itself. As you've noticed, I don't have any short answers.
Hello, and this is really appropriate. That's a real follow-up to what I think my question is. I have been really into lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, and using them for making alliances with fear. And I've been actually trying to encourage the psychotherapists to use lucid dreaming to help people. And I've gone to several giant dream conferences where there will be like one group, there'll be 300 people there, and there'll be a lucid dream conference section, there'll be 7 people. I've heard more people around me in the last, the first 5 minutes I sat down talking about lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences, had interactions with them, than I've had at lucid dreaming conferences. And I've had great experiences where confronting, not confronting, but I guess I could say in NPMR, being able to have an object to be an avatar for my fear, embrace it in some way, and have immediate results. I had a meeting with 2 lawyers, and it's always been something that really scares the crap out of me. And I had this dream, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and did that embracing of the avatar. And it worked. I mean, the next day, I mean, I didn't think it had anything to do with that, but the next day I was so absolutely calm, and meeting the lawyers at a level that was totally appropriate, comfortable. I couldn't believe it. And so since then, I've been really an avid supporter of lucid dreaming, and I think it kind of works in with this. But have you ever used that as a device for confronting fear, or do you support that?
Well, there's lots of things. The question was, have I used, or can one use lucid dreaming as a device for confronting fear? And that seems like an awful short thing to say after the question that was asked. The rest of it was pretty much confirming what I just said in the last question, that does work. When you have the courage to just go and do it, then it generally works out pretty well. But yes, lucid dreaming, out of body, and actually all of the so-called paranormal things can be used as tools for dealing with fear. Telepathic communications, getting data from databases, all of those can be tools for getting rid of fear. The problem with fear is that you are in you have a little tiny perspective in which the fear dominates. And when you learn to remote view, lucid dream, go out of body, your world gets bigger. And you start to see yourself within a larger context. And as you see yourself within a bigger context, that makes it a lot easier to have the courage. That makes it a lot easier to be who you are, because you don't see yourself as just a scared little person that's afraid to get up and talk in front of people. You see yourself as a part of something bigger. You see yourself as an integral, piece, an integral player here, doing its part, learning, growing. And you notice that most people really aren't learning or growing very much. But here you are, and you're working on it. And maybe you feel like you haven't gotten very far, but at least you're in the game trying. And all of that makes you feel okay. And that gives you courage. And you can deal with fears in the non-physical, whether it's lucid dreaming or out of body or anything else. You can deal with the fear in the non-physical in a very direct way. Whereas as in this reality, we tend to take fear and stuff it under the rug someplace. We ignore it, we deny it. We don't really want to deal with it. We want it to disappear from us. It makes us uncomfortable. So we stick it under the rug where we can't see it. We refuse to deal with it. And when you refuse to deal with it, you don't own it. If you don't own it, you can't get rid of it, so you walk around with it all the time. When you get to a lucid dream or an out-of-body, for instance, what you fear manifests right in front of you. And you can't stuff it under a rug because it's right there looking you in the eye, manifested in some sort of metaphor for that fear, and you have to deal with it, and you have to confront it. And if you run away, it chases you. It's not like you can just deny it and walk off, because there it is. So in this reality, we also manifest our fears, but we do it in a very gradual and more subtle way. So it's easier to deny it. When you're in a non-physical frame, you don't have to really manifest mass. You're only manifesting information, and you can manifest things like that. And suddenly that fear of not being worthy you know, turns into something that you can see, smell, taste. It's just there right in front of you. And the idea is that you can deal with it there. And it's easier really to deal with it there in a sense, because now you're in a kind of neutral ground. You're not in your old life, in your old skin, you know, interacting with all the people and what they might think of you and so on. You're in your own space, just you and your fear, and maybe some other players around. And it's a more, I don't know, supportive place in which to deal with it, if you can get past the runaway stage. Many people, first time they go out of body, some big monster comes up and, you know, scares them, and they right back into their body just like that. Or they feel electric shocks going through them, or some other kind of thing that scares them, and back they run and jump back in that body. And that is what I call a fear test. It's just what the system gives you to see whether your fear level is low enough for it to be appropriate for you to go into these areas and have these experiences. Because if you're too fearful, it's not a good idea to go there, because you'll run rather than confront. So once you get to a certain level of success dealing with fear, it's better to use these tools that are non-physical to confront fear, because it's more direct. The fear is less sneaky there. So yeah, you can do that in a lucid dream or whatever. You say you come here and you hear more about lucid dreaming, you know, in 5 minutes just from the people sitting close to you. Well, that's another thing that you should take away from here, is that all the people that are here are very special people. Everybody that's here are people that have open minds. It's people who care and people who are interested in growing up, because that's why they're here. And typically, out there in that world that's outside of this room, you only run into 1 or 2 of those people out of every maybe 100 that you run into otherwise. There's just not that many of them. So you learn to keep your mouth shut and don't discuss, the strange things that you experience. And it's really nice to be in a group that you can just talk about all those strange experiences and find out that actually other people have experiences that are a lot stranger than yours. So that's a nice feeling to be in a group of kindred spirits that are open.
I'll try to project my voice a little bit here.
Good.
So I'm a reader, and all my life I've absorbed information through reading. And I absorbed my big toe within the last 18 months, and decided I wanted to expand out beyond that and read things that were supplementary to or adjacent to. But I've had very limited success. Not everything I say is going to be popular here, but I went and read Mr. Monroe's books, and I got about up to the Loosh farm, and I had to put it down. I still can't get that out of my head, talking about fear. I didn't learn a lot, frankly, from his book that I read. And then I read a gentleman that you had on YouTube, Jürgen Siva, and it was very interesting and frankly very entertaining, his experiences out of body. I really enjoyed it, but I don't think I really learned very much. It was sort of, he had these different, he bounced from here to here to here to there, and it was interesting, but it was sort of so what? With no disrespect intended to Siva, he describing in great detail his own personal experiences. So I continue to search for, two-part question. Are there any other sources that I would describe as supplementary or adjacent to my big toe that you'd recommend? And do you, at some point in the future, have plans to publish, let's say, a new edition of my big toe, or a book or a work that would be supplementary to what your body of work already has been?
Okay. The question is about other sources of information that would give somebody greater understanding about the things that, you know, My Big Toe talks about. If there are other sources that you can read that are valuable, and am I in the process of writing more things that will expand on the knowledge that I already have out there. So first of all, the asker said that he had read Bob Monroe's book, and it was interesting, but he didn't learn a lot. And he read some of the things that Jürgen wrote, and that he thought those were interesting too, but just didn't learn a lot. And the reason that is that think of an out-of-body experience or even a lucid dream experience as a single-player virtual reality game. Okay, that's probably the best model of it. So you go out of body or you go into a lucid dream and it's like, well, now what am I going to do? Well, anything you experience there is data that comes to you in a data stream. The data stream's coming, we'll say, just from the LCS. So it's a data stream, and you're going to make choices in that data stream. And as you make choices, it'll change, it'll go, and the whole story will envelop, and you'll have an adventure or an experience in the out-of-body or in a remote viewing. Think of it as a single-player, custom-designed virtual reality game just for you. In other words, it's personal. So if somebody else came to you, and let's say you were an avid World of Warcraft player, and somebody else came over and said, oh, let me tell you about all the plays and the things that I've done, you would listen and it would be sort of interesting, but you really wouldn't learn much from it, because that's just somebody else's personal stuff and their choices and what they did and how that turned out for them and what it meant to them, and that's not resonating with your experience, because you haven't had those experiences and you find their experience nice, but what does it say to you? There's no big picture. There's no putting it in a context to where you can share that context. All the context is inside them. It's their personal experience. And that's why you don't learn a whole lot from it. You have to have your own experiences, not read something about somebody else's, which is one of the reasons that I don't tell a lot about my experiences. It's just not that useful to people. But that's what people want me to talk about. But I refuse, and it makes them unhappy. But it's just not that useful to talk about your experiences, because they're all personal. And unless that person you're talking to has your experience, then what you explain to them, or has similar experience, what you explain just doesn't mean much. So it's not that these people aren't saying things that are interesting, or even things that are absolutely real, and these were their experiences, yes. But that's as far as it goes. Unless you can identify with that experience, you're not going to learn much from it, other than go, gee whiz, wow, I didn't know somebody could do that. So you can be amazed, or you can be entertained, but it's very difficult to be educated. So that's why you get that. Now my books are very different than that, because I am not talking about my experiences, which are mainly for me. It's my, it's my virtual reality game, custom made for me to help me learn the things that I need to learn. And it was the same for Bob Monroe, and it was the same for Jürgen. He had experiences custom made for him to learn, to grow. And they may help somebody else here and there, but it was custom made for him. It's like trying to wear somebody else's clothes. It'll work, it'll cover you up, but it may not work very well. Okay, so that's what's going on. Now, are there any other sources? There are probably some, and there's probably a few. I know there's a couple of gurus who usually are from the East, usually out of Asia, that seem to be pretty knowledgeable. There's a lot of good channeled material that's come down through various channels that is actually pretty good. But anywhere that you're getting personal experiences, the fit is only going to be so good to you. Now, what else might I be working on? I do have several other things that are kind of in the MBT line that I'm sort of working on if I had the time to actually put on it, but they're concepts anyway. And I have some people working with me that are helping these concepts come to fruition. One of them is MBT for children. Get these concepts and put them into something that you could discuss with a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, you know, at that level, those concepts. Another one is a fellow in Germany, went through all the books, all the videos, which is saying a lot, right? There's thousands of hours of videos. Went through all of that stuff and distilled out from it what he thought were the nuggets. You know, he'd take 5 minutes of me talking and he'll distill that out to a sentence maybe, you know, try to reduce it to just the nuggets that are there, and then he writes all those down, and he was going to do that for everything and then just put it out there, you know, to publish it as, you know, nuggets from MBT stuff, you know, books, videos, everything. And he has it all organized, you know, by subject. So it's not just random nuggets. It's, you know, you go to this chapter, it talks about this. And he thought he was going to do this, you know, like in 6 or 7 months, and now about 4 years later, he's working on page like 900, you know, and it's grown into a monster. And he's not quite sure what to do with it because I'm going to have to work with him to go through it, because a lot of the way he expressed it, of course, was his own vision of what it was that I said, was his understanding of what I meant. And he's not entirely confident that, you know, what I meant and his thinking of what I meant are the same thing. So it's something I'm going to need to read with him and help him put that out. So that's a thing, but he's working on it and he's compiling. It'd be easier for me to just read it and edit it than it will be for me to have to do it. Much easier. So that's coming out. There's been a call for an MBT for dummies. Make MBT lighter and brighter and, you know, not so hard to read. And we're thinking about how that can be done as well, so that it don't squeeze all the actual information out of it. There's a process going on to take all of the videos that have been done, all the YouTube videos, which there's over 500 videos, and the number grows. Every month there's always several new videos that are there. This will be one of them once we're done with this. And to take all of those, you know, they're all, when you play them in YouTube, there's a timestamp for all of them. So they all have titles and they all have timestamps. And they're writing apps and making databases such you'll be able to search across all of them by subject. You'll want to know something about, you know, past lives or getting rid of fear or whatever, then out comes a whole bunch of things where you can do that, and then they're rated. Like it's a 10. If that really explains that subject, you know, that's really seminal, and maybe a 1 if it mentions it and talks about it a little, but it's not, you know, like in a book, you know, you go to the index and there'll be a little CF after one of the entries. Well, that means that's where it was really defined first. So that's going on, and there's teams of people who are working on this project as volunteers. A call went out for volunteers. And if you want to work on this project, actually the lady who runs this is sitting right there. And she's collecting volunteers. How many do you have?
We have about 100 for various different projects.
Yeah.
There's lots more projects.
Yeah, so there's a whole set of projects going on over there in that, because you need volunteers. If you're going to go out and listen to, you know, what, 2,000 hours of video, You can't do that with one person. It would take them longer than they're going to live, probably, to do that. But you can do that with 100 people or 200 people. Now, each one can only maybe spend a few days or something working, and it all comes together if you have clever software to sort it and so on. And another person's writing a cell phone app for that. So you can get your app on your cell phone and put in your subjects, and it'll go up and it'll grab those pieces out for you so that when you play them, you're really playing them out of YouTube. But you're only playing from this, 8 minutes and 3 seconds to 15 minutes and 24 seconds, and it'll just play that because that's the part that fits that. And then it'll go grab the next one from some other thing. So anyway, there's things coming to, that's kind of in the books. And I've been in the books. There's also, I've been working on a thing called Primal Male, Primal Female, which looks at gender and what it means. So if you look under the hood I mean of all the social constraints and all the social ideas and all the cultural overlays that we have on who we are and what does it mean to be male or female. If you can look under all that cultural stuff, what do you find down there under the hood at the roots? And what is that? And how does that affect us? What are our instincts? Humans are an animal evolved here like the other animals, and we have instincts just like the other animals, and our instincts center around procreation and survival, just like all the other animals' instincts center around those things. And that procreation part has a lot to do with gender. So there's a lot of instincts there. And the problem is if you get crosswise with your instincts, you're just going to be unhappy. You're just going to feel non-fulfilled. You're just going to have some empty spaces inside that makes you feel like you're not doing it right. So you have to be in consonance with your instincts. Well, that's one part of the picture. The other part of the picture is those instincts developed to optimize our survival and procreation within the environment that was there then when they developed. Well, we've been humans for about 200,000 years. Before that, we were something else. But Homo sapiens only been around about 200,000 years. So our instincts have developed in a time and a place that was extremely dangerous, violent, where it was iffy whether or not Homo sapien would become extinct or would survive. This idea of surviving enough that your species doesn't become extinct was a near thing for Homo sapiens. So that's the realm in which these instincts developed. A very violent, a very harsh environment. I think most people who lived to a ripe old age in those days made it to about 30 to 35. That's about as long as anybody lived because it was so violent and dangerous. But in any case, so you have instincts developed in that environment. We don't live in that environment anymore. We haven't been in that environment for probably 3, 4, maybe even 500 years. But if you got 200,000 years and only the last 500 have not been in that environment, that's not much. 500 out of 200,000 is an eye blink. So it's only been in the last eye blink that our environment has changed so dramatically that our instincts now don't always serve us. They don't always help us get to where we want to go. But if we get crossways with them, we'll be miserable. And if we just do them without any understanding of them, we're also going to be miserable. You see? So we've got this rock and hard place that we're between because we're in a process of having to change those instincts. But you don't change instincts on a dime. It's not like you can change them overnight. It takes time. It'll take multiple generations. You have to change the whole kind of collective consciousness of humanity to do that. That takes a lot of time. And meanwhile, we need to be aware of both sides. Our instincts stay lined up with them, but a new environment that requires different kinds of attitudes, different kinds of interactions, you see. So that's what this book is about, to try to help people work their way through that maze. And the reason that I decided to write it is after understanding what's in MBT, in other words, who are you, why are you here, what's the point of life, I thought that was basic. You know, that's like step one. But then how do I interact with others? And how do I make connections? And who am I as an individual, male or female? That comes pretty close to second as far as the amount of confusion that there is on that subject. So I wanted to pick subjects where there was a lot of need for clarity. That's why those two subjects sounds like, well, what does primal male, primal female have to do with MBT? The only thing it has to do with it is that as you grow up, you become more and more aware of the difference between you and the cultural overlay that tends to define you. Those separate. When you're not too grown up and you're full of fear and you're full of ego and you're full of beliefs, that cultural overlay kind of defines your reality in many ways, and you don't even notice that it's there. You just grow up with it, and it's kind of reality the way it is, but you don't realize it doesn't have to be that way. It's just your culture. It's just your beliefs. So the MBT helps you get underneath that belief curtain so that you can see clearly what's real and what's learned, what's instinct and what's cultural overlay, which then helps you pull apart and understand the problem. So that's really the connection between the two. So I'm working on a whole bunch of things all at once, and none of them are going very fast. They're all really slow because I'm only home for 3 weeks before I, get on an airplane and go someplace else. And that's not a mode that I can do a whole lot of writing or creating in. But that will settle down one day. I'm going to retire for the 4th time. Someday, but it's not in sight. And when I do, I'll work on all these other projects. Yes, we have.
I had a very unusual experience a few weeks ago. I was watching a music video. I don't watch them that often. I'm a musician, so I like to check in every now and then, see what's new. So I was watching this music video, and there was this really strange thing on there. It was like a mask, and it had 2 eyes on it, and it had this long beak thing on it. And I'd never seen this particular mask thing before, but I felt an instant fear, and I didn't understand why I felt an instant fear to something I'd never seen before. So it was just so odd that I went and tried to look it up and find what was going on. And I found out that this mask was used a long time ago. Long time ago. They were called plague doctors, and as I looked through, these doctors would come into town after the plague had gone through, and some of them were helpful and some of them were not. And I was wondering, is that like a collective consciousness fear that I felt with that thing? Because how could that be my fear if I'd never seen it before?
Yeah. Well, it could have been several things, and maybe multiple things contributed to that fear. One, it was something that was unknown to you. Most people have a fairly strong fear of the unknown, of what they don't know, of what is different, and they can't put it in context. There's a fear of the unknown. Matter of fact, the fear of death is largely the fear of the unknown. So that's part of it. And this thing wasn't exactly a happy little smiley face, with daisies hooked, to it or something. It was something that was obviously to be stark and ugly and maybe even kind of a threatening look with that big, beak and whatever. So it was kind of a threatening image anyhow. That and the fear of the unknown, and yes, perhaps some connection some awareness in the collective consciousness that that was an image that was particularly frightening. Maybe that was frightening because that meant the plague was in that area. If you saw that, you knew that, you know, there was a likelihood that half or 2/3 of the people around you were all going to die in the next, you know, few months. So who knows? It could come also out of the database. Maybe you were had an avatar then. Maybe you were even one of those plague doctors. You know, who knows? So there's some connection there, and the things come together, and you just get a flash and a feeling, and that happens.
The shamans.
Hmm?
They replaced the shamans.
Okay. So,
I don't know.
yeah, how that came about is hard to know. It's very particular to you and your own experience base. Yes.
So since the intensive in Tennessee, a lot of interesting things have happened. I think mainly because you opened up a much larger field of play for me. But it has caused or allowed me to go back and look at things that have happened all my life and sort of try to get a perspective on them, two of which I think are interrelated. One is, in my interactions with people, most of the time, or a lot of the time, I feel like I have an outside observer, watching, considering, and I almost have to make an extra effort to keep the line between me and the person that I'm talking to. But always this feeling of being observed. The second one that I think is maybe related is that I can be going along in a car. I mentioned it last night coming here, but it's happened my whole life, or wherever, and looking out at things and seeing them not through my eyes, like the reality doesn't set for me. It's like, wow, this is interesting. What are those lights over there, and how did these people accomplish this? And it's almost like a visitor looking through my eyes. And I can be completely, I'm aware of where I am and all that, but everything on the outside looks new or like something to be explored or wondered about. So those are the two.
And both of those occur probably because you're getting, you know, you're parallel processing. You're processing here because your eyes are open and you're driving a car, or you're experiencing physical reality. So that's one level that you're processing on. But at the same time, you're getting data from databases. You're open and inquisitive, and you get data from databases. So you're talking to that person, and that's taking place in the physical, but you're also getting information about the context of that person and the context of your conversation and things that are connected to that. And eventually, those will all merge into one thing. But right in the beginning, that new data is then, is then interpreted as being this other vision. You know, it's like you're here, but you're really up here looking at it. Well, it's not that there's really something up there looking at it. You're getting a data stream that's giving you data from a different perspective. And your metaphor for that is this person up here looking at it. That's the metaphor for the different perspective. And you're separating those because it's new to you. Eventually, that'll disappear, and it won't be that new to you, and you'll get both the data streams, and you'll process them together, and you won't have that sense of being dislocated, you know, being here and there at the same time. So it's just a parallel processing in the way you interpret that data, that extra data that doesn't really belong, you know, with the physical data. It just gets interpreted as another perspective. And with the driving around, what you see is, again, more data comes in, and it's because probably your mind wanders a little bit, because driving is something you can do with only half a mind. And we tend to do that sometimes. We just kind of drive, and we've got the other half of our mind that's free to do other things. So daydreaming and driving, particularly if you're on an interstate on a long thing and you're not actually doing a lot of driving, you're just sitting there, you know, keeping up with traffic, and it's not too challenging. And again, you're interpreting this data as you being in a different place, looking out at a different set of scenery. That's how you're interpreting the data. So you see it as an overlay on what you got. And that's why it's kind of weird. Where am I? Am I there or am I here? You're actually some of both. But you're not anywhere. There is no where. There is no space. You're just consciousness getting data streams. And you're not yet real good at parallel processing. So you see them as two separate realities kind of overlapping.
Yes, Tom. I have this question regarding the experiments. Right now, our Farbod is using photons. But is there any chance that at the moment, they change into using electrons rather than photons?
Yes. The question was, is there any chance that we'll do the double slit with electrons as well as with photons? And the answer is absolutely. There's some of the experiments that I think will do much better and be much easier with the electrons. And
but would the setup be different? I mean, would the different equipment?
yes, the setup will be different. The equipment will be different. Some components will be similar. The detectors, some of the detectors will be the same. A few elements will be the same, but obviously it won't be a laser. It'll be probably a heated filament that's throwing off electrons and magnets that guide those electrons in a particular direction, and then a little pinhole that they go through, so you only get the ones that are going in that straight line. And then you have to turn the current down on the filament to make the electrons come one at a time, sort of thing. So it's a different set of technologies, yes.
But would you need to buy that $10,000 equipment for the electron?
The timer?
I don't know.
Let's see. No, you don't have the same correlation issues in time, because the reason we have those correlation issues is because we're dealing with entangled pairs. And when you do the electrons, you're not dealing with anything that's entangled. So you don't...
As always, there's constant cross between doing it with electrons or photons.
Yeah.
But would you prefer the electrons to be used?
I prefer the electrons to be used for most of the experiments. The only reason I'm doing this one with the photons is because one of my experiments does have a similar setup to this, so we're going to have to do it sooner or later anyway. And after you get past, I guess, just the initial setup part, this particular experiment is very simple. It's a very easy thing to do conceptually. The other ones are a little more difficult to do. So this is an easy, clear experiment that everybody looking at it will be able to follow pretty easily. It's done with polarizers, and I don't know. So we just started here first. It was a suggestion that we start with this, and since we had to do the photons anyway, so we might as well start here. But I've asked Farbod to, while he's working on this, to be also working on coming up with the things that are going to work with electrons, because some of these experiments are going to work best with electrons. Some of the experiments I have, it's important to take the particle pattern, which is just 2 lines, and this pattern, which will have a lot of lines, and the diffraction pattern, and shift those around so that these two fall right in the empty spaces of those. In other words, to deconflict the patterns. That's an important part of it. And I think that's going to be much easier to do using electrons than it is going to do with photons.
So it would be a good thing to get an idea of what kind of different equipment you need to get in order to get the experiments accomplished.
Yeah, we actually have a list of that. We actually have put together a list of all the equipment necessary to do it.